In today's Health Alert, two popular weight loss drugs went head-to-head in a clinical trial, and one of them came out on top. Participants taking Zepbound lost more weight and more inches off their waistline than those taking Wegovy. So joining us with details, our chief health editor, Dr. Partha Nandi. And Doc, what is the big difference between the two that made this happen?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? So what we found was it was very substantial. People taking Zepbound lost nearly 50% more weight than those in Wegovy. Now, the 72-week trial followed 751 adults who were either overweight or had obesity. They also had at least one weight-related health issue, not including type 2 diabetes. Now, the participants were given a weekly shot of the highest dose they could tolerate. Now, for Wegovy, it was either 1.7 or 2.4 milligrams, and for Zepbound, it was 10 or 15 milligrams. And here's what the researchers found. It was very interesting. For weight loss, people on Wegovy lost about 13.7% of their body weight. That's about 33 pounds. On Zepbound, they lost 20.2%, or about 50 pounds. For waist size, Wegovy users lost an average of 5.1 inches, and Zepbound users lost about 7.2 inches. In addition, about 1 in 6 people on Wegovy lost at least 25% of their body weight. With Zepbound, it was nearly 1 in 3. Another interesting finding was that women in both groups lost more weight than men. On average, men lost about 6% less.
So what about side effects, and should people switch?
And we were talking about this just before the segment, right? More than 3/4 of the participants had at least one side effect. Some of them saw me this afternoon, in fact. This was mostly mild to moderate stomach issues like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or constipation. However, about 8% of Wegovy users and 6% of Zepbound users had to actually stop because of them. Now, Zepbound clearly led to more weight loss in this trial, but it's worth mentioning that when Wegovy was tested at a much higher dose of 7.2 milligrams, people lost around 20.7% of their body weight. That's a big jump from the 13.7% we saw with the lower doses used in the head-to-head study. It's also closer to Zepbound's results. So having said that, you got to remember, this is not about the numbers on the scale alone. It's about improving health. You got to remember that participants taking both drugs saw better blood sugar, better blood pressure, and blood fat levels like cholesterol and triglycerides. Also, Wegovy is currently approved by the FDA to help lower the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Zepbound doesn't have that approval, at least not yet. So no one should stop taking or change their medications because you just heard this without talking to their doctor. The best choice really depends on your health, your goals, and what works best for your body. And again, it's not a panacea. It's part of a whole plan of diet and exercise, because we have to remember that. Don't just take a shot and expect miracles, right? It's about a whole plan to improve your health.
All right. Thanks a lot, Doc.
My pleasure.
That's huge.
Of course.
If you have a health question for the good doctor, you can email him, Dr. Nandi at AskDrNandi.com, or send it to us on Facebook or X. We will get it right to him.